Why, Marvel? Please stop changing the comics to adapt to the MCU. Hey, it's Jug. Marvel Comics has written some monumental and amazing storylines, as well as some absolute stinkers. But in both cases, Marvel Comics has been trying to let their writers write and have some creative freedom to tell some interesting stories. Except for the few times that editorial has meddled. One more day. However, over the last decade and a half, Marvel Comics has been losing their ability to create freely, and it's been due to one thing and one thing alone: the MCU. Don't get me wrong, the MCU is great and I love a lot of the stuff in it, but the MCU has started to develop this hold on the comics where whatever the MCU does, the comics has to follow suit. This has led to a whole number of plot and outright character personality changes that seem to happen out of nowhere for a comic book reader. Some of the biggest examples include Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and, well, actually, the whole Guardians of the Galaxy. But Star-Lord was changed most drastically, from being a sort of stoic, well-thought leader to being more of a sort of fly-by-the-seat-of-the-pants goofball like Chris Pratt's character. Next, there's Loki. Loki was always sort of a mischievous Thor villain in the comics, but he was never sort of the anti-hero he was in the MCU. Loki was an outright villain. Yeah, there might have been a few times he did something not terrible, but the change to anti-hero didn't really occur until the Marvel Cinematic Universe realized the character's popularity and potential and started shifting the character in the direction of anti-hero in the movies and the show. This was a well thought out and story-driven change in the MCU, but in the comics, it just kind of happened out of nowhere, quick. However, there's one recent change that sparked a whole controversy of debates online, and that is the death and resurrection of Ms. Marvel. When Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, was introduced 10 or so years ago, she was an Inhuman, which made sense with her origin and powers. I mean, Black Bolt, the king of the Inhumans, released the Terrigen Mist, a wholly inhuman thing, into the atmosphere, which triggered latent Inhumans to get abilities and powers. Kamala was one of these latent Inhumans who received their powers in this wholly inhuman origin. However, as Kamala's popularity increased due to her comics and her show, and the Inhuman popularity kind of stayed the same, if not got worse, after the television show, I don't think it was bad, I just don't think a lot of people watched it. And the MCU also reacquired the rights to the X-Men films. They began to change Kamala into more of what the MCU wanted, slowly turning her into an X-Men. In response, Marvel Comics started to change Kamala as well. It all started around the time of the show when Kamala was put in a Spider-Man book, because she didn't have her own title at the time, as a sort of side character working at Oscorp. In this extremely controversial Spider-Man run, Kamala would only appear a couple times as sort of a background character or in passing conversation, but then they killed her off in issue 25 in a very debatably disrespectful way. However, it was not long, only about a month, before Kamala was resurrected in the comics. But with the caveat of this resurrection being that the X-Men brought Kamala back because they have these resurrection pods, and apparently Kamala, who they were friendly with, has this latent X gene as well. Kamala, arguably the most popular Inhuman, was now reworked to not only have a latent Inhuman gene, but also a latent X gene, just so she could fit better with the MCU. Originally, it was believed that either the writers or the editors at Marvel Comics made this decision because they thought that they had to be more in line with the MCU, which is bad enough. But in a recent interview with Spider-Man Miles Morales writer Cody Ziglar, he said that he heard from Amazing Spider-Man writer Zeb Wells that apparently Kevin Feige had called Zeb Wells and asked him to kill off Kamala, like just fit this plotline in so we can turn her into a mutant in the comics and line it up with the MCU. If this is true, it would mean that the MCU was directly meddling with and changing the comics instead of just allowing the creatives to create, which is something we would not like. Look, he's angry. However, since the interview, both Marvel Comics and Marvel Studios have made announcements claiming that nobody ever said this. They tried to claim that the conversation with Feige never happened and that the mandate to make Kamala more in line with the MCU was just false. Cody Ziglar or someone made it up, which would be really weird because why would Ziegler make that up? So who knows who's telling the truth, but I think that the comics should just stop changing for the MCU. But what do you think? Should the comics and movies synergize? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.